There has been a debate going on for a decade now on whether the gold standard or cryptocurrency is the better option to base a currency on. They both have one pro that distinguishes them from each other, but cryptocurrency has one positive attribute that gold cannot compete with. However, both are better options than the current monetary system we have in place. Let's start the journey of understanding both the gold standard and cryptocurrency, as well as why one may be a better option than the other. Welcome to Monumental Venture, where we strive to educate on topics that truly matter. The gold standard is where a country's currency is linked to a specified amount of gold. For example, in 1934, the ratio of gold to dollars was 1 ounce of gold to $35. The one benefit that really makes gold stand out is that no matter what happens, the gold never disappears. Whether we have electricity or not, gold has a physical element to it, which means that it cannot completely lose its value. It also has a very good track record for the last 5,000 years, and every time a fiat currency fails, like the current US dollar, gold returns to the default exchange of value. However, the gold standard still has limitations. One of those is that the amount of gold can be manipulated. An example of this is that in 1934, FDR raised the gold standard from $20.67 to $35 an ounce, making the dollar lose 69% of its value overnight. Another limitation is that in order to have the gold standard in place, we have to audit the government to ensure that they have the right amount of gold for the dollars in circulation. This is easier said than done. For example, the Treasury of the US and the Federal Reserve has never had a full audit done on them to make sure they are staying true to their commitments. There is a theory that this aspect of not easily being able to audit the entities that produce the currency became the reason why the US is no longer on the gold standard. To understand this theory, you have to understand why the US became the world's reserve currency in the first place. This is due to the fact that after World War II, the US had most of the gold in the world. Instead of redistributing the gold, an agreement was made that the dollar would stay on the gold standard and all other major currencies would use the dollar as their standard. This in essence kept all currencies on the gold standard and is how the dollar became the world reserve currency. This is where the theory comes in. In 1970, more and more countries were looking at what the US government was doing with the Great Society project that President LBJ was pushing and thought that the gold standard could not be met anymore. We were spending money like nobody's business, and yet the dollar was still set to be $35 per ounce of gold that FDR set it back to in 1934. This means in order to be spending so much money, the Treasury had to keep adding gold to the reserves to meet the gold standard. Some of those countries wanted an audit, while others threatened to trade their dollars in exchange for the gold that was rightfully theirs. However, the US did not have the gold to meet the gold standard requirements and did the only thing it could. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon ended the gold standard because the countries were correct that the US was taking advantage of having a global reserve currency and could not meet the gold reserve requirement anymore. The gold standard is definitely better than what we currently have, but still requires individuals to be honest and to have society believe that it holds value. Also, thanks to advancements in technology throughout the centuries, the ounces of gold were able to expand with the growth of the human population. This allowed an ounce of gold to hold a relative stable value throughout the centuries since the supply and demand for gold grew equally. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin have all the attributes that the gold standard has, with the exception of the physical element, but does have one huge benefit over the gold standard. There is an automatic audit of the system built into cryptocurrencies. To help understand this, you have to understand how cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin work. In very simple terms, it works like this. Every Bitcoin has a special authentication code that allows it to be tracked. Then every user of the network that makes up Bitcoin also has a unique code attached to them. This means when one Bitcoin is transferred from one user to another, we know where the Bitcoin came from and to what user it went. Then this information is put into a block that is formed every 10 minutes holding other transactions, which then become part of the chain of other blocks, hence the name blockchain. This allows us to see a record of all transactions made on the Bitcoin network, or what is referred to as the ledger. We can see what wallets hold Bitcoin and make sure transactions are being completed properly. Now, this does reduce the privacy at an individual level, but for companies and the government, it allows us to see where Bitcoins are coming from and going. Imagine no longer wondering how your tax dollars are being spent, because you can track where they are going. This also allows us to see if more Bitcoins are loaned out than in existence. See how political figures are receiving donations, see how money is being spent in the bureaucracy of the government, and how public-sponsored projects almost always go over budget. Technologies like Bitcoin blockchain allow normal individuals like everyone watching this video to have transparency of what the government is doing. This means if you want to know the truth, then follow the money. Yes, there are problems with transparency, but imagine the power that would be transferred back to the people if the government was audited on a daily basis. It'd be very hard for politicians to lie because they can't hide the money as easily in this system. Both the gold standard and cryptocurrencies offer great options for the value that is created in the economy to be exchanged for a more easily interchangeable store of value. Also, like the goods and services we produce, gold and crypto cannot completely lose their value. Unlike the gold standard, cryptocurrency, through the use of technology like blockchain, can allow audits to be done of the monetary system. Also, with technology, we can now tie currencies to the physical time of human beings. The reason for this is that time is one of the elements that make up the value of the economy. Also, all humans have a limited amount of physical time that we can spend on the planet before we pass away. This means that everyone starts at a relative equal playing field because time is limited, but how you use your time will decide your life outcomes. Technology can help us track that time with the number of people on the planet and adjust the currency supply to keep the supply and demand equal. In order to have a stable society, you have to have a stable exchange of value created through the production of goods and services and consumed through the needs and wants we have as individuals. Keep your eyes open, ears alert, and morals intact. Have a great day and never stop learning.